Well, it's delightful to hear you, Anne. It's delightful to meet and get to hear live the performance of an English harmoniumist. And what I wanted to do is ask you what you felt the scene is now in England, since you've done all the pioneering work on establishing the harmonium as a viable instrument in England, and where it's going now in England.
Okay. Well, I started with the harmonium about 30 years ago, and it was in the context of some people who owned and restored harmoniums and who really wanted to promote the cause of the harmonium. And I really give all credit to those friends and colleagues who were really making everything possible. And they said, well, we'd like to interest some organists in the harmonium, and we'll put an instrument at your disposal, and we'll even pay you to make a recording.
Wow.
So that was how my very first contact with the harmonium, which was the Rossini Petite Messe Solennelle, when I was but an organist, but confronted this instrument for the first time. And after that, as I say, these dear friends, as they became later, invited me into their home to put an instrument at my disposal, and a new world opened up to me, which is different from the organ world. It's very interesting. And each has its own devotees and so on. The organ, as we know, is a well-established instrument, has a great status, and everybody knows what to expect with the organ. However, the harmonium is a very different proposition. Even at the time when it was being developed, there were a kind of division of opinion about the harmonium. There were the very high-level artistic instruments and the sort of lower-level mass-produced ones. And even in the heyday of the harmonium, that dichotomy, that dual personality was apparent. Anyway, I was very fortunate in that my friends had access to some of the best instruments, and they made the music, appropriate music, sound just so amazing. So it was really on that foundation of their support that I took an interest in the instrument, and as I say, this new world kind of opened up that I didn't suspect even existed. And subsequently, the people who restored and owned harmoniums increasingly got to hire them out to people who increasingly were interested in having this real sound from the 19th century, because these instruments, while they've mostly been restored to playing order, still speak with the authentic voice of that time. And it's part of the period instrument revival that has now come up to probably the mid-20th century, that professional groups in London and around the country wanted the correct sound for the music that they were going to perform. The harmonium, as we all know, has its own specific technique of playing. And so I, on my own and with some advice, and mostly with a very good instrument, learned to master keeping a sound steady by pedaling with your feet on expression. And after that, it's really up to you and your imagination where you take it from there. So at the beginning of my career, if you like, as a harmonium player, I did quite a lot of orchestral work, being invited to play, the orchestral part with of the harmonium in an orchestral work or whatever. And gradually, the orchestra's own keyboard players learned those skills.
Wow.
So that kind of work fell away, but on the other hand, more solo work came up and so on. And it was really fascinating to study this repertoire for an instrument which sounds absolutely amazing when it's well played and with the right music. And at a certain point, I too had the chance to pass on that interest and that love of the harmonium, because I was asked to start a course at the Royal Academy of Music in London to teach the organ students there how to play the harmonium. So they just get a little taster, as it were, an introduction, but it's quite rigorous, and they are given probably more than I had to start with, but given a technique of how to learn to play with expression, and some repertoire and some guidance on how to play that. And occasionally the opportunity arises for them to play a concert involving solo and ensemble music for harmonium. And when that happens, the students are just delighted because they love to play this instrument. It's such a personal and individual instrument.
Well, that's very, very full expression of your career. And the thing that I wanted to ask you about, it looks like in at least England, thanks to you and your...
Oh, and many others besides.
Yes. It's now found some place in the
I
culture.
would say that's true, yes.
Now, I know that you came to the United States many years ago.
Oh wow.
And this is a question I have, and I'm not sure whether there's an answer for it or whether it's something that's bothering me, but I'm concerned that there won't be a good foothold in the United States because of the instruments not being there in plenitude. And I wonder whether you have anything to say about that.
The question about the instruments is a really important one because, of course, to play the harmonium at the highest level, you need the best instruments.
Right.
And it may be that they have been imported in previous, even in the 19th century, in some numbers. It would be surprising if they hadn't. Yeah. I don't know whether it's still possible to import. The best instruments were basically made in France in the 19th century. Right. Whether it's possible to still import those instruments or whether it's simply a matter of good instruments coming to light. Mm-hmm. Because once there's a kind of a body of interest for the music and the instrument, instruments seem to appear because people who may have had one and just not known what they had suddenly think, oh yes, well we've got one of these as well. I think another thing which may be very specific to the United States is that the homegrown instrument is what we call an American organ.
Right.
And that works on the suction principle because free reed instruments as a keyboard instrument exist in two forms, the suction instrument and the pressure instrument. And it's the pressure instruments, largely pioneered and made in France, which are the ones which have achieved a great repertoire, and people are studying them now a lot. However, the suction instruments also have a very, very good part to play, and it's they will be found in plentiful numbers, I'm sure. Artis, you would know more about that than I, in the United States. So I think it may be that your pioneering work on the suction instrument particularly will be as important in establishing interest in the instrument. And I also think that instruments will probably either come to light, as I've said, or perhaps be able to be imported into the country. Right. The only tricky thing about the harmonium is that they don't make them any longer.
Exactly.
So there's a finite supply.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, we'll just have to see what the future will hold, but definitely what you've done has really helped it tremendously, and I'm deeply appreciative of what you've done, and I think many others as well.
Well, Artis, reciprocal congratulations on your part.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Marvelous.